Well, good morning, everyone. On behalf of everyone here at Schoolcraft College and the Schoolcraft College Foundation, we want to welcome you and thank you for joining us this morning on what we feel is an extremely important topic. I'm going to turn this program over to our moderator, Dawn Magretta, who's the Executive Director of the Schoolcraft College Foundation, and allow her to introduce our exciting panel. Dawn, take it away.
Thanks, Chris. We hope that this will be a good interactive discussion around diversity, equity, and inclusion, in that all of you learn a little bit more about this topic. The issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion are not new concerns facing society. Historically, there have been countless examples of the inequity based on gender, race, age, body image, sexuality, and even religious beliefs. Society recognizes the injustice, but that is only half the battle. As these issues continue to plague us as a society, education offers one true opportunity to broaden the sense of understanding and hopefully break the chains of hate. Today, our panel is comprised of advocates who understand that our differences are what actually brings strengths to us and a truly productive society. So today with me are Kimberly Keaton-Williams, the Vice President of Talent and Acquisition, and most recently appointed Chief Diversity Officer for McLaren Healthcare System. We have Dave Garcia, Executive Director of Affirmations, the LGBTQ+ Community Center, and Sharon Christian, who is the Director of Learning Support Services here at Schoolcraft College, along with being a member of the college's D.E.I. task force. So as we encourage you to submit questions through the chat box, but while you're doing that, I'm going to kick it off with asking each of the panelists that we're going to begin with something a little personal. What does this topic mean to you? And how do you define diversity, equity, and inclusion? So I'm going to start with Kimberly. Do you want to start, answer that question first?
Sure. So I guess I'll start with a formal definition, but then I'll share a little more personally what it means to me. So from a definition standpoint, diversity meaning representation of multiple identities and cultures, and inclusion meaning that those different identities and cultures are valued and appreciated and leveraged to the full benefit of an organization, and that those different identities and cultures allow us to be our best as a team. So that's a pretty, textbook approach to it. But, I think personally, growing up, it wasn't something that was necessarily on my radar. And even as a society, I don't know that we talked about it so much. I won't say how many years ago when I was, a younger person. But I think when I first noticed it was when I went to college and I chose the field of engineering and realized that I was being reached out to, by a number of organizations because I was a woman and that category of diversity was underrepresented. And I was also an African American. And so as a young adult, I did start to realize that there were some inequities in the process that caused certain groups of people to be underrepresented in critical areas. And so not only race and gender, but people who have a disability or people who have economic disadvantages, people who are LGBTQ. And so I think as I learned, how that impacts the long-term potential for people, as well as for myself personally, this topic has been very important to me. And I honestly, I feel fortunate to to work in this field because it's something that I would personally advocate for and have advocated for all my life. And so it's really a privilege to be able to work in this area formally as part of my job.
Thank you, Kimberly. Dave, I'm going to pose the same question. What does this topic mean to you, and how do you define diversity, equity, and inclusion?
You know, it's interesting. I was born in a Mexican-American family, and my father is very dark-skinned Latino, and my mother's she's not Latino, and she's very white-skinned. My brother, who's only a year older than me, is dark-skinned, and I was more light-skinned. And I always felt as a kid, even now, some ways, not dark enough to be Mexican, and with my last name, too Mexican to be white. And even growing up, my grandfather called me Wedo my whole life. I was Wedo by my family, not just my grandfather. And I always felt different than the rest of my cousins. And then, of course, when got a little bit older, and then I was figuring out that I'm gay in a Mexican-American Catholic family, I felt even more different. So personally, it's always been on my mind. It's always been a part of my existence. Professionally, so many years later now, you know, Affirmations has a new board ad hoc committee of the board for DEI work. And we talk a lot about, obviously, POC, people of color representation on our board of directors. But it isn't just about POC, as important as it is to reflect our community with the African American population and the Latino population and Arab American population. It's also about social economics representation on our board. It's about straight people, by the way, on our board. We have 3 straight individuals on our board, and their perspective is very important. It's about age diversity on our board of directors, because our seniors, our LGBT seniors, are facing very different issues than our LGBT youth. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is so much more than just POC issues, but POC issues are extremely important. And we need to reflect the community in which we serve at Affirmations. That's our intention. Since I've been back, this is my second time around as the executive director of Affirmations. I've been back for 2 years now from Los Angeles. We've had 3 new board members, and 2 are African American and 1 is transgender, because in all of our recruitment at the board level, this is on our mind. But it isn't just the board and what the board reflects. It's DEI work in all of our programs, all of our marketing and communications. Everything that we do should have a DEI lens. So personally, it's been something I've been dealing with my whole life. Professionally, I don't see that changing anytime soon either.
Thank you, Dave. Much appreciated. The next panelist is Sharon Christian. She's the Director of Learning Support Services here at Schoolcraft. And again, we pose the same question to you, Sharon. What does it mean to you, and how do you define diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Thank you for the question. So the first thing I want to say is DEI for me has been a road to self-discovery. In my work here at Schoolcraft, I've had the wonderful opportunity to be a part of the DEI task force, which I believe is one of the most important works that we can be doing here at Schoolcraft. And it's really helped me get closer to my own identity. So learning about myself as an Asian Indian and also as an Asian American woman, it's been quite the journey, and it's given me new appreciation for my own culture, but it's also opened my eyes to the disparities that various cultures and different folks in the diversity community face on a regular basis. So one of the things that I've definitely learned more about is some of the adversities that are faced by our minority groups, so our people of color, also our LGBTQ groups as well. So it's been a really important journey for me because it's been a really amazing learning opportunity. And I feel like I'm always learning something more, and I'm always looking to learn something more. As far as defining DEI, so I came across this analogy somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where I found it, but I really liked it. So it was really an analogy about the dinner table and how DEI can be represented at the dinner table. So diversity is when you invite everybody to sit at the table. Equity is where everyone can have access to what's on the table based on their needs. And then lastly, inclusion is where everyone gets to chime in at the table during the dinner conversation. So it's a really simple analogy, but I think it really resonates with everyone. And it really gives that general idea of what DEI is and how important it is every day.
Thanks, Sharon. And I invite everybody that's on this Zoom meeting to please feel free to pose questions throughout the webinar. Sharon, I'm going to start with you. Since we're talking about education, I understand you invited a member of the DEI STARS program to join in the discussion. And would you introduce your guest and explain a little bit more about the DEI STARS program?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to first start with a little bit of a description of our STARS DEI program here at Schoolcraft. So STARS DEI stands for Scholars Taking Off Academically and Rising to Success, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. It is a scholarship-based program that was generously funded by our Schoolcraft College Foundation and our donors, in which students at Schoolcraft gain the leadership experience while attending their classes. And so we have 4 pillars that we focus on, which is leadership, academic success, service learning, and diversity, equity, inclusion. So our students can take on one of 3 roles: a scholar, mentor, or mentee. It's led by our amazing Learning Support Services team members. We have Ursula McWhorter, Dr. Wilson, and Jenny Rokakis, who I believe some of us are on the call here today. So I wanted to give a shout out. And we have our amazing student here that I'm going to introduce at this point. So Alexis Gibson is here with us. She is a wonderful student, a leader, and she's active in student organizations and student activities. And she's also a student employee and a scholar. So she does a lot of amazing things. So with further ado, Alexis, if you wanted to jump in real quick.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Alexis, and thank you, Sharon. Yes, I am a freshman here at Schoolcraft. This is my first year. I have a lot going on. I am a student employee at the Learning Center, and I love it. And also being one of the scholars for the STARS DEI program has truly been an amazing journey. And I look at so forward. I'm so happy to be a part of it, and just, oh man, it makes me just happy to, you know, like Sharon said in her question, what it means to her. It was a self-discovery. It took us on a journey on a lot of things we're blind to, but also open up our eyes to see how we can be better people, better individuals in our diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and in our everyday lives.
Alexis, while you have the floor, do you want to talk a little bit about what inspired you to become involved in the DEI STARS program, as well as have you witnessed a time when another student or group of students were not accepting of another's diversity?
Well, okay. So I guess I'll start with, you know, before or have I ever witnessed? So definitely, like I said, this is my freshman year at Schoolcraft. So I'm a class of 2020 out of high school. And every year we would get foreign exchange students. So we will always get Chinese students, Germans, students from Germany and Denmark. And well, once they came in about November or December of 2019, we started hearing about cases or, you know, about the coronavirus, you know, outbreak that was happening. So a lot of individual was happening. Excuse me 1 second. Hey, good morning.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to Alexis. Not sure what happened. So hold that thought. And let me go to Kimberly. You serve a dual role within the hospital system. And how are you able to encourage new and current employees to honor and respect the uniqueness of each individual? And I know you and I've talked a little bit also in your role. What have you discovered in terms of the various communities in which you serve?
So, well, let me start with kind of the second question first. So McLaren has 14 hospitals, and all of them are across the state of Michigan, with the exception of a newer hospital we acquired in Maumee, Ohio last fall. But if you look at our patient population as well as our employees, we have diversity across all dimensions. And so we have our Carmanis Hospital, which is focused on cancer. We have Carmanis throughout our system, but the Carmanis headquarters is in Detroit, and we have locations in rural areas such as Bad Axe and Carroll. We have a hospital in Flint, which is our largest hospital. We have a hospital in Petoskey, Michigan. So there's a lot of diversity in our patient base as well as our employee base. And so it's absolutely critical that we have diversity for our value for diversity in our employee base and our patient base. So the way I've approached it at McLaren, and this is in partnership with our executives, is we did start with a foundation of training. Training is not an end all be all by any means, but when you have an organization that is nearly 30,000 employees, you do need to, start to educate your employees on why this is important and also how they can be a part of the solution. So we required all employees to take foundational training in unconscious bias. We are now in the process of having our senior medical leaders participate in facilitator-led training on health equity. But again, that is just the foundation. The way I see this is DE&I really needs to be woven throughout our organization, every part of how we practice our business. And so we have 5 pillars. We have one that is focused on our talent. So that's our employees, how we acquire them, how we keep them engaged, how we retain them, how we handle succession planning and development. We have a pillar for our patients, which gets into the health equity piece, as well as patient satisfaction, patient outcomes. We have a pillar focused on the community. So beyond our patients, we obviously want to be good citizens in our communities that we serve, in which we serve. We have a pillar focused on governance and corporate responsibility. So what does our leadership team look like? What are our policies and practices? What does our board look like? And our last pillar is supplier diversity. And so even from where we purchase our products and services, we want to purchase from diverse business owners. So the way we've approached it is to start with a foundation of training, but really now we are looking at all parts of our business with a diversity and inclusion lens, because really you don't want DE&I to be a program that's over to the side. You really want it woven throughout your strategy. And so my goal has been to make sure that everyone understands, 1, what our strategic pillars are, and then 2, show how our diversity and inclusion mission aligns perfectly with our mission as an organization, which is to be the best value in healthcare is defined by quality outcomes and cost. And so I can directly tie diversity, equity, and inclusion directly to our business mission.
That's great. Thanks, Kimberly. Alexis has joined us back. She had a bad connection. So Alexis, well, let's go back to you and you can talk from a student perspective. Are you back on?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry. So,
Right, so
go ahead.
okay, so as I was saying before, we used to, in high school, we used to get foreign exchange students every year, and they used to stay with us for the whole year. So once we started hearing about, they came in about November or December of 2019, and they stayed with us until New Year's, and we had a great time with them. Then we started hearing about the coronavirus outbreak and how it was starting in China. And so a lot of students started looking at, our Chinese students different because they went home for Christmas and New Year's. And when they came back, a lot of students were scared that they had brought this virus with them, and they were just really on edge, and they started treating them different. But instead of, I guess, putting them on the side, you really had to step up, be the bigger and better person of letting them know that they weren't alone, because everyone was scared. They didn't know what was happening. We're all high school students. So, a lot of petty things were going on, and it was really hurtful to see, see them not feel accepted, anymore like they had when they first came. Because with open arms, we welcomed them, we invited them, we showed them our culture, traditions, things that we do. And so when this started happening and everyone started treating them different, it just really broke my heart to see that. So what inspired me was to really just, like I said, to step up, to be that bigger person, to let them know that they weren't alone and that they should always feel accepted. And also in high school, I was a part of this program called the STARS DEI program. Sorry, not STARS DEI, well, F Standard, Defeat the Label program. It was an anti-bullying program. And I started taking a couple of our foreign exchange students there with us in our programs, and they did different activities and recreational things. We did after school activities as well, but they were more involved than ever before we got shut down. So, but they really had fun. It was really great to see them laughing and smiling. And, but it wasn't just our foreign exchange students, it was also other students that didn't know about the programs, or students that felt like they weren't accepted as well. So with that being said, after everything shut down, the program didn't continue no more than March or April. And so in college, when I was given the opportunity to join the STARS DEI program, I was kind of skeptical at first, because as a freshman, you didn't want to get involved in a lot of things. You had a lot on your plate, but I had the great support of, our STARS task force to give me that right push to join the program. And man, I don't regret anything about it. But what inspired me the most was that I knew that I wanted to continue the program that I was in high school, but the STARS DEI program just really opened up my eyes to a lot of better things, going on. And I never know how I'm going to apply the things that I've learned from the 4 pillars that we learned, service learning, leadership, academic, and, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It just really means so much as you go on this journey to, find, ways to serve the community, but also how to better yourself. And, you just don't know how you're going to apply it until you do. So every day I look at the accomplishments that I made, I reflect on it, and it just brings me so much great joy that I'm always, constantly learning, constantly being a part of this program, and also being a better person in the world. Because at the end of the day, you want to leave your mark no matter where you go and make a good impression on whoever you meet. I've never met a stranger before, because I always welcome people with open arms, and it just means the world to me.
Thank you so much. And actually, someone just sent in a thing in the chat, Alexis, that so glad you decided to engage with the STARS DEI program. Your leadership matters. So congratulations on your first successful year with that program. Dave, you have been so patient. So I'm going to go to you now. Recently, you had to deal with a very difficult situation that took place right in front of affirmations. Can you share a little about what took place, how you worked to resolve this matter before it became a really horrible situation? And do you feel that the parties involved learned something special? So if you want to sort of teed that up, but you're going to have to expand on all of that.
Affirmations is Michigan's largest LGBT center. Many of you have been there or been by Affirmations. We're on 9 Mile in the heart of Ferndale, a beautiful 17,000 square foot building. And we had some protesters out front recently with their God hates fags signs. And, in the heart of Ferndale, mind you, in front of the center. So The community didn't take kindly to that. And we, of course, had many community members start coming down the street and out of the local businesses to confront the guys with the signs. Now, the guys with the signs also had cameras around their necks, video cameras, because they record the kind of reactions that they get. They have the power of the edit. They put it out on their own websites to raise money for whatever their purposes are. So in some ways, it's better to just ignore them. But now we've got crowds showing up and people pulling their cars over to confront these guys as well. So, and you had local businesses coming out, putting up rainbow signs and rainbow flags all up and down 9 Mile as this is happening. Mind you, since COVID, we have handed out over 5,000 meals out of affirmations, meals, clothes, medicine, shampoo, toiletries, out of the back of affirmations. On Wednesdays and Fridays, you just have to pull up to the back, pop your trunk, and you get your trunk filled with whatever you need. And we're almost to 5,000 meals served since COVID. So this is happening out front while we are giving food out of the back. And I told one of the guys, I was like, put your damn, I might have used stronger language than damn, sign down and come help us hand out some food. But they weren't interested in that. And then a week later, all LGBT leadership throughout the state of Michigan received a threatening letter. And I've been doing this for over 25 years. I've had many death threats and many threats in my career. So, but because we have what's called the Michigan Community Centers Network, which was established when I got back from Los Angeles, of all of the 10 centers across the state, the FBI was able to talk to all of us at once and talk about hate crimes and hate speech and the difference between the two. And if we needed active shooter drills at our community centers, that they would conduct those for us. And so to be able to have a network like that where we can talk to the FBI when we are threatened was very, very important. Now, in that particular case, I ended up walking up to their leader after a couple hours of this standoff, which was starting to get pretty heated. And I said, look, man, it's Friday. I want to go have a beer. It's been a long week. I don't know where you think this is going to go. You know, what the outcome's going to be here. You're surrounded. Like, where do you think this is going to go? And he said, well, listen, if you call your people off, then we'll leave. And of course, an officer, a Ferndale police officer, was right between the two of us as we were having this conversation. So I pulled everybody on our side into affirmations and talked to them about the food program and some of the plans that we had and how we were going to plan on reopening. In the meantime, the Ferndale police escorted these guys to their cars, and that's how we eliminated that particular situation. Now, we will handle it differently the next time, because the next time, I think what we'll do is, oh, by the way, we also raised $10,000 while they were there, because people went to our donation page and started to donate to affirmations. When things like that happen, I just want to reiterate that we also have significant progress. I was just asked to do a training for the Michigan State Police for all of their incoming officers while they're at academy. That's a big, that would never have happened 20 years ago. And I see some officers on this call here. For us to be able to work with the Michigan State Police to train their officers, their incoming officers, that's significant. And for me to be able to say to them something like during that training, look, domestic violence is just as prevalent in the LGBT community as it is in the straight world. So when you go to a domestic violence call and it's two guys or two girls, recognize that the same power dynamics can exist in a same-sex couple relationship. But oftentimes officers aren't trained to recognize that. Oftentimes officers think it's just two guys in a fight or just two girls in a fight. So for us to be able to have that conversation at that level, that's progress. When we had a job fair, and I looked around the job fair at affirmations, and we had the Navy and the Army and the state police and in the FBI at our job fair at affirmations. That would not have happened, I'm telling you, 25 years ago when I started working in this arena. So just to be able to have dialogue, sometimes even with our friends, people don't think about our largest group at affirmations are our LGBT seniors. And in many cases, those seniors lost their jobs when they came out. They lost their families. They often did not have children, so they don't have the social safety network of children. They may have been with their partners for 30, 40, 50 years,
and their partner dies, but marriage is new. So they don't have the Social Security safety net that many in the straight community have when they lose their partner. And then they go to an assisted living facility, and those assisted living facilities are often religious based. And so they feel like they've got to go back into the closet after living a life with integrity and being out for fear that they're going to be mistreated in an assisted living facility. That's what our seniors, and much less isolation for our senior community. Our biggest group that meets at affirmations are our seniors, just to combat isolation. But people don't often think about these things. And even if that assisted living facility is not homophobic, they often just simply lack the cultural competency to treat the community. So I could go on and on about those different type of examples that we often don't even think about in our community, but the only way it changes is for conversations like this, and for me to be able to, with integrity and authenticity, talk to officers like I see on this call who care, truly care about protecting everyone in the community.
Dave, thanks so much for bringing up all those points too, because I think you're spot on about having to continue these conversations, you know, at all in between all ages and generations, to really understand and really build it into our fabric of our daily lives. I did receive a call in the chat that I'm going to open it up actually to all three panelists. Although possibly Sharon, you can start first. Every Schoolcraft College program has the core ability to demonstrate social and cultural awareness that may offer an opportunity for students to be more fully engaged with DEI conversations. In what tangible ways can faculty expand students' knowledges and experiences? And I know that Dave, you and Kimberly, you are not hands-on, educators, but I'm going to start it. But I'd like to get your input on that too. And Sharon, why don't you start from a DEI task force and your role working with students in this arena?
So ways that faculty can integrate DEI within their teaching and everyday curriculum, I would say, is to really open that space for open and honest communication, with respect being the center of that communication, mindfulness being the center of that communication. It's really to create that safe environment where people can explore their questions and their concerns when it pertains to DEI. So often I like to think that silence is the enemy of DEI when we don't talk about these things, or when we don't feel comfortable having the conversations about them. We tend to basically create a distance. And when you create that distance, then that silence grows even more. And then that distance between understanding things from a different perspective grows even more. So creating a conversation and asking some open-ended questions so that people can explore within themselves what DEI means to them, but also what see the world through their lens, but also perceive the world through other lenses as well. So I think if we could integrate that into the classroom, where the students would have the opportunity to have that conversation, whichever classroom it is, whatever discipline it is, I think being able to and being open to having those conversations in that environment and creating the environment in the first place is definitely a good start to that conversation.
Okay, Kimberly and Dave, do you have anything to weigh in, Kim?
I'll just share a very, tactical strategy that I enjoyed when I was in grad school and really just starting to appreciate diversity. You probably already do this as faculty, but I remember being placed in groups with people who had totally different backgrounds from me in every single way, from their religion, their culture, their industry background, their functions such as finance versus engineering. And I remember that was the first time that I truly appreciated diversity. As a student, I remember thinking, gosh, this is going to take us a long time to get through this project, because we all were bringing our own perspective, and it's like, oh, this is going to be frustrating. But what I can tell you is that there was this project that we worked on at U of M where we had to do a consulting project with a company. And I remember when we got through that project and we presented our solutions to the customer, that I remember thinking to myself, there's no way that any one of us could have come up with this by ourselves. And so we were all better from having that experience and really taking the time to learn from each other and hear different perspectives yielded a much better project, a much better and holistic set of solutions. And I remember thinking in my early 20s, wow, this is pretty magical. And so that's a tactical thing that I think can be not only planned for in the class, but maybe even asking students after that experience, what did they learn beyond the, the textbook approach to problem solving? What was that experience like? And how are you better from working with people whose communication styles and cognitive styles and backgrounds are different from yours?
Great, thank you. Thank you, Kimberly. And Dave, do you have anything to weigh in on that same question?
I really agree with everything Kim just said. And I also think that, don't be afraid to bring in speakers in that outside perspective, no matter what your class is. I know that some of my favorite talks have been just going to the University of Michigan or other universities around and just sitting in on a class and talking about shared experience, because just having that open communication and speaking from an authentic place can change lives. Many of us on this call graduated from university, and those first couple years when you're outside of your comfort zone, you're outside of your communities, you're meeting new people, it's such an important life-changing, life-altering moment for so many of our lives, and the stories that you hear and the people that you meet. So bring in more of those perspectives is really important. I often say that the greatest threat to the LGBTQ community since HIV/AIDS is the religious exemption. And what we are seeing with the religious exemption across the country. And it is not just about wedding cakes and wedding photographers. When you have a doctor in Detroit a pediatrician refusing to treat a baby because that baby's parents are lesbians, or when you have mental health providers refusing to treat the trans community, or primary care physicians refusing to prescribe hormone therapy to the trans community, and all hiding behind the religious exemption. Now, those are tough conversations. We got to have them, and we got to have them openly. And when better to have them than your freshman, sophomore year of college?
You're so
Probably before that, actually. We should, much before that. But many times, as we all know, these kind of perspectives are not even introduced into young people until college.
Thank you, Dave. So I have another question, and I hope I'm relaying it right, but discuss the difference between equity and equal within the role of within DEI. So equity and equal within DEI. Do you want to start, Kimberly?
Yeah, I'm so passionate about this, in general, but especially, in healthcare, with making sure that our leaders understand that treating people equally is not going to get us to equity. And so, I know it sometimes sounds counterintuitive to say we're not going to treat people equally, but then I give them a very practical example. So Sharon, I loved your analogy about the dinner table. And one that I give people is, let's say you have 3 children. You love all of your children with equal passion. One of your children is struggling to see in the classroom. And so you get them a pair of glasses because that's what they need in order to see with the clarity that your other children were already fortunate enough to be able to see without glasses. You have another child who needs braces, but your other 2 don't need braces. And so as a parent, what do? You get the child braces that needs braces. You don't worry about, well, gosh, I'm not getting my other children braces. You get the child braces that needs it. And the third one doesn't need braces or glasses, but they are struggling in math. And so I, as a parent, what do? I get them a math tutor. And so really what you're doing is you're focused on the outcome rather than treating everyone the same. And, we all can talk for hours about why there are so many systemic inequities that require people to have different types of support in order to achieve their maximum outcome. So I am just beyond passionate about this topic, because until we look at equity with all types of passion in healthcare and education and every part of society, you are not going to have a place where everyone has the same potential to succeed.
Okay. So Dave, you touched on a little bit on this, but one of the questions we had was you've seen these types legal attempts to regulate discrimination toward the LGBTQ community. Are there similarities? Do you feel this new legislation is difficult to enforce, as it seems to be for the LGBTQ community?
I mean, we've been having these battles for decades, right? I mean, I was fired, but the only time in my life that I was ever fired was back in 2000 when I was responsible for after school programming. And I was simply trying to start a support group for LGBT youth after school, what we would nowadays call a gay straight alliance, but we didn't even have that language back then, and especially in my town of Swartz Creek, Michigan. So I said I was going to help them. I came out with them and told them that there was nothing to be ashamed of, and my desk was in the hallway on Monday. And there was no recourse. There is no, to this day, LGBTQ sexual orientation and gender identity protections do not exist in law in the state of Michigan. So that's why we're trying to amend the Elliott-Larsen Act to protect us in public accommodation and in housing discrimination. But we have a very conservative government in Lansing, and it won't even be allowed to come out of hearing, much less a full floor vote, even though the governor has said she will sign that legislation. The same thing at the federal level. We have what's called the Equality Act, which we've been trying to get passed forever, and that finally passed the House of Representatives under progressive control right now, and the president has said he will sign it, but we need 60 votes in the Senate. And we are nowhere close to getting 60 votes in the Senate. And so it's not going to happen again this year. And so I get very frustrated with these constant battles of people legislating what is, in my view, just equality, legislating my civil rights. All we want is the same exact rights that the straight community has. We're not asking for anything more or different. But man, all they got to do is put a commercial of some guy in a dress following a little girl into a bathroom, and we lose.
I know this has been a topic for years, so I empathize with your role and keep on fighting on that.
We will. And we have made progress. I want to make sure that I don't want to leave you discouraged. We have made significant progress. Like I said, the Equality Act has been passed by the House of Representatives twice now. That had never happened before. And we're going to get there. And in the meantime, we see municipalities passing protections. And certainly many states across the country, like California and others, have passed protections. We just haven't seen it here in Michigan from a state level, and we have not seen federal protection.
Thank you, Dave. Sharon, I'm going to pose this question to you. The question is, I understand the DEI acronym, but what consideration is being made with adding the B as in belonging, especially in an educational setting? I thought maybe Sharon, if you want to start, and then Kim and Dave, if you want to weigh in.
So the question is asking about a B and belonging to add to the DEI.
Yep.
So this is, to be perfectly honest, this is the first time I'm hearing about that, but I think that's a wonderful concept or idea. I think belonging is a unique phenomenon of its own, and I think that it does need its own, I guess, definition, its own movement, and its own understanding with everyone. So I'm excited to learn more about that, and I'm guessing some of our panelists have some exciting things to share about it as well.
Yeah, that's the first I've heard. That's the first I've heard as well. So Dave, do you want to weigh in on that, or Kimberly? Either one.
It did remind me of something that I hope I leave you with. It's not exact, it's kind of a little bit of an offshoot, but you know, we've dealt with LGBTQ plus A, ally, Two-Spirit, the acronyms as well, and trying to make sure that everybody feels welcome and belong in our community. But I want to ask you all a quick question. If I were to ask you, what is the leading killer of the LGBTQ community, what would you say? And many people say, oh, it's hate crimes or it's suicide. Two big issues in our community, right? Hate crimes are up. Trans women of color are being killed in epidemic numbers across the country. And certainly suicide is a big issue. Or they'll say HIV/AIDS. And that's a big issue in our community too. But it's smoking. Smoking. We smoke at twice the rate as the straight community in the B, and sorry, not the same B, but the bisexual community at 5 times the rate as the straight community. So I just want to bring that up because it's often not talked about, and we need to talk about it more because that's the leading killer of the gay community.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Kim, do you have anything more to add on that, adding the B to DEI?
You know, I have heard people more recently talk about belonging, but don't know a lot in this area yet. But I would say that, you know, creating a culture of inclusion leads to people feeling like they belong. And, you know, I think we all yearn for that feeling of being, you know, in a place where we belong and not feeling like we're an outsider, whether that's in the classroom or whether that's, you know, in the workplace or whether that's in your place of worship. And so I can definitely understand the value in belonging and why it's kind of taking inclusion to that next level. And I definitely understand from a business perspective, you know, what that would do in terms of employee productivity, you know, and employee retention.
Thank you, Kimberly. It's really interesting. Another question that we had in, how can we center the minoritized identities that can often be invisible or not discussed enough, such as mental health, neurodivergency, and fat phobia? Does you want any of the three of you? Dave, I see you took your mute off. Do you want to?
I just think we need to be intentional about those things in the same way we are with DEI work. You know, we just had a image conference at Affirmations for folks who are overweight and the discrimination that they face. And we had a 2-day conference about it at the center because we were intentional about that. Same thing with, you know, when we talk about DEI work and are we including the disabled community, and how are we working with that community? Are they being reflected in our boards of directors and in our programming? Native American community, everything that the question brings up, I would just challenge all of us to take the time to be deliberate about addressing the issues and about in all areas, and take all of the areas of mental health, looksism, everything that we face as a society, and be deliberate about tackling those challenges.
Thank you. I saw Alexis, our student, weighed in on the belonging. Alexis, do you want to mention about the WEB, Where Everyone Belongs?
Yeah, so Web is actually a program that I was also a part of, and about high school, and middle school to high school, but it was very effective for like freshmen, for younger students that were coming in, transitioning from like elementary school to middle school, or also from middle school to high school, and also in colleges as well. But it stands for Where Everyone Belongs, but also it's really just for anyone, because everyone has the place where they belong. You just have to find it, but also it's the people that make them feel like they're accepted or that they belong, no matter what, race, color, gender, sex you are. But it was very effective, and I think it'd be a good idea to add it to the STARS DEI acronym.
It's great. Thanks, Alexis. Okay, this one is an interesting one. And then I'll get back to a chat question. There's speculation about media escalation of critical issues. Do you feel reporting on hate crimes or stories about Harvey Weinstein, Black Lives Matter, or Matthew Shepard educate the general public, or is this encouraging this behavior? It's kind of a hot one. So Kimberly, I'll give it to you first.
Give me the hot one, huh? I guess I would say, there's some level of, sensationalism that, probably happens, in news stories, and especially now because the news cycle is ongoing, and it never ends, and then you have so many channels for getting access to media that we didn't have years ago. But I do think it brings about awareness, and I do think the stories need to be told. I mean, I think about if the George Floyd murder had not been recorded, we would not be having the conversations we're having right now, and they're tough conversations. And I'm not here to be political, but I would say that there are some things that we should all be able to agree on, which is, treating everyone with decency and treating people, in a way that you would want your family member to be treated, and treating people, with humanity. And so I do think, and that's just one example, and I know that that can be a pretty fiery topic, which isn't my intent. But I think, again, had that not been recorded, then the narrative around what happened there would have been different. And I don't think some of the discussions that are happening now about how to, reduce the disparities, in treatment, especially for, certain people, I don't think we would have pushed as far as we have right now. So I do think that we need to be honest, and we do need to have conversations about what's happening with hate crimes in the LGBTQ community, or African American community, or Asian community, or the differences in treatment for people with disabilities. We need to have the discussion.
Thank you, Kimberly. I had another question from the chat. What accountability measures should higher education institutions take to make sure that students are having equitable access and culturally competent faculty? So I'm going to throw that out to Kim and Dave. What are your thoughts on that? How we can do better as a higher education institution?
Kim, I wonder if you can take that. I kind of wanted to go back to the media question real quick.
Oh, okay, sure.
Only because as long as it's done responsibly, I think the coverage is important. What happened to Matthew Shepard started my career. I mean, what happened to him in 1998 was the reason that I wanted to get more involved, and has led me to 25 years of LGBTQ advocacy. Where I would challenge the media is I'm getting a little tired of constantly reading about things in the LGBT press, like trans women of color being killed across this country and in our state, and it never being picked up in the straight media. So I get frustrated when I see that. I think that's really where the question and the energy should lie. The issues that are killing the gay community, like tobacco, that's never, you never read about that in the straight media. Or trans women that were killed in Detroit just a little while ago. I mean, so that's where I would challenge this media question, but it's an important one. I think some of you are probably better positioned for the university question.
Sharon, do you want to take that? What you see?
Sure. Could you repeat the question, please? Sorry.
Sure. What accountability measures should higher education institutions take to make sure students are having equitable access and a culturally competent faculty?
So I'm going to start with the culturally competent piece. So I think while training can't encompass everything that needs to be done, I think training is a good place to start. I also think as far as how we're recruiting is a very important piece of the puzzle as well. So recruitment of diverse, having DEI at the center point of recruitment of talent for the institution is a very important piece of the puzzle as well. As far as having more equitable environments for our students to be able to identify and recognize where we do have those inequities present within the institution, and to be able to proactively and actively make those changes that we need. For example, maybe wheelchair accessibility, the bathroom needs as far as LGBTQ, and as far as also making sure that we have the resources we need for our students. So those are the kinds of things that I think actively we could be doing in higher ed in general.
Great. You know what? We have 3 minutes left. So that'll be the last question. If anybody wants to make, Kim, do you have any closing remarks that you want to make? And then Dave, and then Sharon?
So closing remarks, I would just say I remain optimistic for the future. Now, some of that is just my nature. And I think in order to do this kind of work, you have to have some optimism to keep you going. It's not easy work. It's not easy discussions. But I think if we all take some accountability in the solution, that we will continue to move forward. And so that includes holding ourselves personally accountable for growth and learning in this process. We're not going to be perfect in it. I think we need to make sure we're respectful to each other, even to those that we disagree with very strongly. And, I work very hard on that to really pause and to try to hear and listen and understand where someone may be coming from who feels very differently than I do. Because my immediate response might be, to feel, negativity. And then I think we really have to keep pushing ourselves on the topic of equity. So just to wrap it up with tying in your last question, Dawn, take a look at your outcomes for your students too. That will often lead you to where some of the, equity issues are. So if you look at graduation rates, for example, when you see differences in graduation rates from different populations, that will let you know where there are some equity issues that need to be addressed. And I would say, take a look at the metrics that you already hold yourselves accountable to at Schoolcraft, and then put a D&I lens on it and see what you can learn from there.
Thank you. Dave?
I just encourage you all to get to know Affirmations. Come on by, ask for me. I'll give you a tour of the facility. We have a lot of internship opportunities. We do a lot of fun special events too, along with all of our recovery groups and mental health services and some important stuff. But we have a lot of fun there too. We have theater. But we do have internship opportunities for you, and I hope you'll get involved, whether that's from an advocacy perspective or with our mental health program or many other opportunities. So let me know, reach out to me. I'm easy to find, and thank you very much for taking some time with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for taking time with us. Sharon, any closing remarks?
So I'm going to echo some of what Kim said earlier, is that I'm really hopeful for what will happen in the future for DEI. I think we've begun the conversations, and soon I'm hopeful that we'll see some of that action that needs to happen take place. And also, it's not going to be a perfect journey. We're always going to be learning. There will be some mistakes along the way, but I think as long as we keep that forward momentum, that's going to be the key to really seeing that positive change we want to see in our societies and in our communities, in our schools, everywhere. So I'm, just looking forward to being a part of that, and looking forward to continue learning about it as we go on. And thank you, everybody, for your time.
And Alexis, thank you for joining us as well. Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you. Chris is the mastermind behind today's program. So thank you, Chris.
Well, thank you, Dawn. And panelists, I can't thank you enough. There's an old saying that says you have to be taught to hate and distrust. And I think with people like you in our community, we might just learn how to be more open-minded and learn to really get along and love one another. So thank you for taking the time. And everyone online, thanks again for joining us. You are the community that we love to be a part of. I hope you'll join us on June 17th. We're doing our workforce and education convening, which with everything happening because of the pandemic, there's going to be a very interesting discussion going on there too. So keep an eye out on our website. We'll be sending out our normal invitations, or just contact us at the foundation. Again, everyone, happy Friday Eve, and have a wonderful, safe holiday weekend. Bye-bye.